When I say the Queen's Gambit, it's not trying to beef us up to be like royalty or anything. It's a big chess maneuver on the Queen's side. The Gambit is the sacrifice.
Those three things, I think that's what I lacked in, and I think that's why I might have fallen a little bit harder than others.
Your content online inspires a lot of people. It's not the glitz and glamour of being a mother. I think what people crave nowadays is the reality.
Anything worth having in life has to have some self-sacrifice that goes along with it.
So when I started the Queen's Gambit episode, I knew I wanted to do a series on motherhood and fatherhood. Obviously fatherhood because of me and my perspective, and knowing that Gracie has a different perspective as a mother now. I don't know, like what people say nowadays, there's a lot of different conflicting ideas about it, but being parents, I think there's a very distinct difference between my role and Gracie's role in raising a kid.
Right.
And I think it's one of those beautiful things that just puts us in a place of you have no other choice but to own this role now. It's a special responsibility. So great. I've only had one Queen's Gambit episode with Gracie, and I always go back and forth. Like, I know a lot of people. We talk with like a lot of people, and you were always one of the ones that I saw, like with your content, especially about motherhood. I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So before anything else, I want to welcome Mrs. Ruby Ann Lopez. Welcome, Ruby Ann.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you. But like I said, your content online inspires a lot of people, and it's not the just the glitz and glamour of being a mother. I think what people crave nowadays is the reality,
Right.
because it's not easy. It's the opposite of easy. It might be even harder than difficult. And your content kind of shows that reality, and I know you've been through a lot. So when I say the Queen's Gambit, it's not trying to beef us up to be like royalty or anything. But I think that every mother has the responsibility of a queen, and not just to hold a position, but to fill the home with whatever a queen brings, everything that a queen brings. And the Gambit is the sacrifice. It's a big chess maneuver when on the queen side of the board. There's a big sacrifice early on in the game, and it's a very effective strategy. It generally works well, but there's a big sacrifice that has to be made on the queen side, which is why I want this episode to be specifically about motherhood, and I want you to be the next one on the Queen's Gambit series.
Thank you.
Thank you. For those that don't know you, tell everybody about like what you do.
I teach high school. My degree is in bio, and I used to teach high school biology, but right now I teach high school marine science. So I work mainly with juniors and seniors.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. You've been doing that for how long?
7 years.
Wow. Wow. And you love teaching, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I do love teaching itself is probably the best job. In not just in the classroom. I think every parent, just teaching it in and of itself is such a fulfilling, vocation, I would call it. It's not really a job. I mean, excellent. As a high school teacher, but it's awesome. But there's definitely challenges with teaching high schoolers.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. Well, I worked in adolescent psych for a good amount of time. That generation, that phase of life is already a challenge. I can imagine it helped you prepare for becoming a mother.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Although I think 16 to 18-year-olds now are so different from what we know when we were that age.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Times have changed a lot. So yeah, you're married, mother of one. Her name is Reina, and it's such a beautiful name. I'm actually just curious who named her.
So we kind of both did. Like, we were trying to think of a name that started with an R just to kind of keep consistency. Nice. So it's RJ Ruby Ann. And then I was like, okay, let's try to think of a name that starts with R. And all of the names we thought of did not start with an R, like at all. We thought of so many names that I could list off right now. And then RJ had mentioned, she's like, well, what about Reina? And I was like, I like that. But let's hold off and let's wait until we actually like meet her and we'll see. So we had like 3 names on our list. And then when she was born, we looked at her and automatically were like, Reina.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. And if people don't know, Reina means queen.
Yeah. And so it was kind of like a mix between our cultures, right? So RJ is Mexican, and then, you know, my Filipino culture, which has a lot of Spanish influence.
It does.
And so in both languages, in Spanish and Tagalog, Reina means queen. And so we're like, this is perfect.
That is perfect. Yeah. And she's 1 now.
She's 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, making it through that first year, it's a whole different ball game, I think, at each stage. Early on, like just the months alone are a big change. Weeks, if anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes days. You have this long series online, like things you've learned in motherhood,
right,
through motherhood. And there's so many gems. If people haven't seen it, I would probably say go to her page right now and look at those posts for sure. It's a lot of realities and struggles that you've dealt with. What compels you to start putting stuff like that online? What compelled you to start it?
I think there was a need for me to feel connected to somebody else other than like, you know, other than my husband, other than my daughter. I just felt a need to connect with another mom. Just because, and I'm sure a lot of moms might say this too, is like when you first enter motherhood, the role alone can feel extremely isolating just because you are literally the lifeline for this baby. You know, like you provide that baby its food like 24/7 every few hours, right? So it's just like this nonstop thing. And there was a part of me that wanted to feel connected to somebody who was kind of also going through that. And at the time, you know, like at least like in my small group of like, you know, close friends from high school, like no one has another baby. Like I was kind of the first one in my group. And so that was like, okay, one thing that made me kind of feel a little bit alone, although they were there for me. It is different. And then another part was the thoughts and feelings that I was feeling. I felt like I wanted something to reaffirm that I was not the only one going through it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And so, you know, you see stuff online about moms, and for me, it was like, okay, it's time to kind of just break the ceiling here and actually show people what motherhood can really be like, all of its beauties, but also all of its struggles and hardships. And I think that's what makes all of the amazing things about motherhood that amazing. And I just kind of found a lack of that. Like no one told me that this was something I was going to feel in motherhood. No one told me that I was going to have to do this or feel this or, you know, struggle like this. Yep. Like no one told me that. And so I almost felt like I was so unprepared in some ways to become a mom, even though I felt like, no, I got this, you know, before she was born. And so there was a part of me that almost wanted to just generate like a small community of other moms who, you know, might have gone through it, but also just to learn from them and just start that, that almost like that communication lifeline that I so needed at that time, you know.
It's bringing people together like under the reality of life, you know, and I think that's what a lot of people would get from your content. What do you say to people that look at it, or like, let's say, you know, women that aren't mothers yet, or they're planning to, or some of them even reject it.
Right.
What do you say to those people that see the content and they're kind of like afraid now, or they're becoming a little bit more resistant to it?
So I did speak to someone who was in that same boat. She's not a mom, and she's like, oh, I've seen your post, and she's like, now I'm like getting really worried if like when I become a mom. And I said, no, like I understand your worry, but I like promise you that motherhood is the best role you could ever have in life. But it's just important to understand that it does come with there is self-sacrifice that comes with it. Anything worth having in life has to have some self-sacrifice that goes along with it. And for some people, it manifests itself in different ways. But for me, this was this was how I was having to go through it. And it doesn't mean like, oh, like, you know, I had to just go through more stuff than other moms. It's like, no, everyone has their own struggles. It's just, it happened to me this way. And, you know, it's okay. Like there's so many resources, there's help. And like, I think I also created it because I wanted to be that other mom for another mom.
Yeah.
Because I wanted that from other moms too at that time.
Because I know your content is really to encourage and bring to light the beautiful things about being a mother. Like you said, I couldn't have put it any better. Anything worth it is both extremely difficult but extremely beautiful. And I think anything worth sacrificing for is the exact same thing. And what I get afraid of too is I post a lot of like reality for people about being a father and stuff, and it does push people away sometimes. And they're like, you know, I don't want that. But at the end of the day, it's worth that sacrifice. It's worth the risk, if anything. When you do see your daughter, when you do see her, you know, thriving in life now, and I think the biggest thing is if we only knew, not to scare people away, but to at least bring people to the awareness that this is what could happen. And if it did, you have someone who's spoken on it. You've had somebody who could support you, that you could reach out to.
Right.
How did the conversation end with that one person? I'm just curious.
She was just like, oh, okay, like, yeah, you're right. And she's like, well, I still want a kid. I'm like, exactly. Like at the end of the day, like you're still going to want to start your family if, you know, you're on that track. But I think, and I was just talking to RJ about this too. If I were to talk to someone who was thinking about having kids and they asked for advice on how to prepare for it, it's like, take away all of those classes, like take away like how to take care of a baby. It's more, you need to just prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Wow. That is like those three things. And honestly, like I will say, I think that's what I lacked in. And I think that's why I might have fallen a little bit harder than others, is just because I lacked the strength in those three areas.
Wow.
As opposed to like, I mean, I was physically trying to take care of myself, right? I was I was going in nesting mode, like, you know, setting up the house and everything. But it's like, none of that matters unless you actually like strengthen your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And that's something that I think that's just why I felt a little bit harder. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you're right. They don't prepare you. I mean, they do have all these tips and you know, bringing ideas to like what can help you physically prepare, because obviously that's necessary. But I've seen, and it's so hard. It's so hard to talk about too. But I work in mental health, and not everybody realizes that just because you get pregnant, your mental health, like your disorders or your syndromes or your conditions, automatically stop when you get pregnant. It's actually heightened. And I've been called to very, you know, dangerous situations at the hospital. Like they would have like an emergency, like combative person, and I would run over to a unit, and it would be like an 8-month pregnant mother. And I'm like, what do we do, guys? Yeah. And that's such a struggle that people don't want to talk about. They kind of push it to the side, like, let's not even talk about it, because it's hard to talk about. Like you said, it's very real, and if you don't take care of it, ultimately it's a risk. It's a danger.
It is, yeah. And even like during pregnancy, I didn't even know it. I actually had perinatal depression.
Perinatal.
Yeah, so like not postpartum, but I like the thoughts, like the intrusive thoughts that I was feeling throughout pregnancy. I was like, I just thought, oh, it's just a hormone imbalance. And part of it is, however, like part of it is just also like the mental capacity that I had almost, and just being willing to like not being able to navigate through that. And so that's kind of where it sort of started. And then postpartum, it just like kind of unraveled itself to everything. And then, that's when I like started to realize like, oh, okay, I think some of this stuff might have happened, like you said, like even before pregnancy, and pregnancy just started to exacerbate it little by little, even more and more. And then postpartum, it just is it's a whole new world once you enter that.
Man.
Yeah.
I think that's the fact that it heightens. It scares me a lot, because I know a lot of people are dealing with mental health issues. and not to like romanticize it too. I know that there's some people that might not have it as bad as others.
Right.
And I've seen people in severe mental health conditions. If we don't start working on it or tackling it now, and then you have kids.
Right.
It's so scary to even think about, because we already know healthy individuals have children. The struggle is real already. Imagine if we haven't worked through a lot of our, whatever it is, traumas or, difficult pasts, and we haven't processed through those things. And then now you have a person that's dependent on you. It's so difficult. And me and Gracie, we talked about this on our previous podcast. Children, especially when they're young, they are completely objective. They're relentless. They have no opinion about things. It's like you showed up or you didn't, Dad. That's it. Like, I'm hungry and you didn't feed me because you're too busy or you're going through it. They have no idea like what we're dealing with. They just know, well, I need my diaper changed. I need to eat. Are you gonna feed me? Because I don't know how to do anything. And to see that and how objective that is, it really hurts, because like there's times where you feel like, could I have done more? Or am I using this as an excuse because I'm going through something?
Right.
And it's like a hard line to come up to, because you don't want to use anything as an excuse. But then again, it's reality. Like, I am actually going through it.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not saying this is unique to me, but for someone who is going through PPD and postpartum anxiety as well, like you stepped into this new role, so you don't even recognize yourself, right? Because you have now filled in this role as a mother, and then you're now also dealing with something that's like basically limiting you on just regular day-to-day activities almost. And then you're also taking care of this child who's still trying to figure things out too. So at times I kind of just felt like Raina and I were both learning together. Like, she was learning herself. She was learning me. I was learning myself. I was also learning about her. And so kind of just changing the mindset around that. It's like that alone helped me show a little bit more compassion with myself and even with her, because there are hard days, right? Like, there's days where they're crying and you just don't understand why they're crying, and you're like, what am I doing wrong? And like, if you're already at the breaking point, if you're already going through postpartum depression or anxiety, just simple things like that could already send your triggers through the roof, and you'll just start, spiraling almost. But at the same time, like you said, because you're the parent and you have this little child, you can't fall, like you can't break, because there's literally somebody depending on you. And so I think that's the hardest part. And I almost think that's why a lot of people don't talk about it enough, because in the day-to-day reality, you can't, because you're taking care of a kid. You don't have time almost to go through your feelings and like just sit with it and like navigate through it, because there's someone that's really depending on you, right? And so I think that's almost why the talk about it is suppressed. And that's part of the reason as to why I was like, okay, let me just make these posts once a week to like see if, we can like talk about it more, because when it's not talked about, it doesn't feel normal, even though it's completely normal. Right. Yeah. And so I think even for someone who's listening to this and isn't, a parent yet, this is something that shouldn't scare you. It's more like, hey, this might happen. It might not. But if it does, it's okay. Like, it's okay. You will get through it, even when it feels like you won't. Right? There's literally been somebody else in your exact shoes. But I just think we don't talk about it enough, because as parents, we're like, we got to keep going. We're on the go. And you just don't have that space or the time to really sit with it, which is what we're trying to, tell our kids to do, is just sit with your emotions for a little bit so you can learn how to self-regulate. But we don't even have a chance to self-regulate our own emotions.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like, how do you create a space like that? Because I know we're blessed to be married to wonderful people. Right. And RJ to me he looks like super dad. And I love that about him. He's such a fun-loving guy. How did you work with him and create that space for you?
So, like you said, he really is super dad. And so when I feel something coming, when I start to find myself spiraling, he can see it too now because he understands the triggers as well. And he'll say like, you know what, take a minute. And so my safe space is our walk-in closet, and I just sit in there in the dark. Wow. I literally just sit there, or I'll lay down and just like sit. Sometimes I'll be crying. Sometimes I just need a moment to just sit. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. One time it was an hour and then I fell asleep. But you know, like sometimes that's just like what you need.
That's what you needed, yeah.
I'm really thankful that I have RJ to kind of give me that, because yeah, like in moments like that, you need to retreat and pull back. Otherwise, it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your baby or even your partner.
Mm-hmm. Eventually, me and him are going to have a talk about it. Again, his perspective on it. Because I can imagine he has his own battles too. And speaking from a dad, like there are times when I have to recognize that with Gracie too. And we have good communication. And it's like, yeah, I need this, I need that. Like we'll create space for each other. Like I'll take the kids. Like, why don't you go to the store by yourself for once? Like that just going to the store alone is such a big thing that you forget it's valuable.
Right.
But the battle is shared, with the father, with the husband.
Right.
Because you're building this together. And we'll definitely have a conversation about it too, me and RJ. To have that type of guy, what is it about him that you value? Like, I mean, he can help you and understand. What are some attributes that you would say like make him a very special king to you?
So you know how earlier you said kids don't have opinions. All they see is if you're there or not. I feel like I'm the kid, and the only thing that really matters to me is that he's there.
Wow.
And so I think that's been really special about him is he will show up no matter what. He will drop everything. Like if it has to do with his family or somebody really close to him, he will be there. And he will make that commitment and he won't back down from that. And I think at the end of the day, when you are starting a family, if you have a family, you can have the biggest house, you can have all the riches, you can have everything that the kid physically needs. But at what expense? At what cost? Like even this year, when Reno was born, right before Reno was born, he got laid off from his job. And then 6 months after, he got laid off from his other job. And so we went through 2 layoffs at the time that I wasn't getting any paid leave anymore at that point. So it was just like, oh my gosh, why do we have this kid? And like, now we're like, battling through all these financial struggles. And it was definitely a testament of my faith, because there were times where I was like, how do we still have a roof over our head? Because we're taking out loans left and right just to kind of keep paying and sustaining us. Just like, I can't even say living paycheck to paycheck, because paychecks weren't even enough to pay for our daily stuff, like our monthly expenses. Yeah. And so it got to a point where I was like, what is most important? And through all of that, he's always been there. He could have easily, taken a position that might have taken him a few hours away from home, and then he, be gone like 14, 16-hour days, but he didn't. And we both realized like that's okay, because I think right now the most important part is to just be there, and it's okay. Like we will figure out a way. Money will always come around, but your presence, your time, like that for us was like the most important. And I think that's what is really special about him. Yeah, like when people meet him, he's like the funny guy. Yeah. I call him the life of the party, because he just has this really good, positive energy that he brings with him.
Always.
But take all of that away, and he's really just this guy who will show up no matter what. Committed, loyal, no matter what. He will not turn, he won't turn his back against you. Like he will just, when you're with him and it's just, that's the safety that I feel with him. And I think that's so important. And that's why even going through the stuff that I went through postpartum, I know it wasn't as bad for me because I had a partner like him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long were you guys together before you got married?
We got married. The day we got married was I think 8 years being together.
Wow.
Yeah. So we got, yeah.
And I think that's getting more and more rare nowadays. Finding that one person that you've been with for extended period of time.
Right.
For me, that might be one of the main keys when you've not only invested, but when you've committed to somebody. Because I arguably, like before you guys even got married, you were already devoted and committed to each other. And that commitment spans whatever struggles are in our path. And I think that's what helped, you know, me and Gracie when we go through these trials and struggles. It's how do we navigate through all these other trials in the past? What helped us? How do we grow to be the people we are now? Now we're together, we're building a family, and then here's this new trial. And that comfort that you're talking about, that like he's always shown up. You don't even have to think twice about it.
Right.
You know he's going to show up. And sadly, speaking for men, I feel like that's becoming more and more rare to have somebody that's devoted, committed, loyal to something, to someone, to things that are greater than him. And like you said, that's the one thing that's so special is that he just shows up.
Right.
Sometimes if guys are listening to this, what makes a family work, a marriage work, is not just, hey, like we'll have good talks and stuff and you know, finances or whatever. Sometimes we don't even realize the value of just showing up for people. Because, you know, we look at like who's going to show up for me all the time. Like, you know, but to sacrifice on the guy's side, the man's side, the father's side, the husband, it's just sometimes being present and being aware of like what your wife needs, what your kid needs.
Right.
Like you said, that's like the simplest thing that guys don't even realize is what women value, what a mother values,
Right.
a wife.
Yeah, no, and I think that is the biggest role a father has. Now that we've become parents, we've seen like, okay, like the mother really is that lifeline for the baby, you know, but the father's role is to be there. And it's hard. Like I've seen it with RJ because he was basically taking care of the both of us. You know, I'm taking care of Raina, but I couldn't even take care of myself. And then he's like taking care of me, but he's also taking care of Raina when I couldn't. And so like he was that person. He was the one that was just always there. And I think like you see it in movies too. A kid's performing in their school performance. They're looking in the audience, waiting for to see their parents. And as soon as they see their parents, their eyes like light up, right? That's the one thing that they just want us there. And so that's something I've been really thankful for. And you know, we've considered like other professions, like, you know, he's like randomly brought up going into like law enforcement or the firefighter, like some sort of job where it's going to take days out of the week away from. And I said, you know, like if you want to do that, you know, I totally support you, but at what expense? Like, are you okay that you're going to be gone for this long? Are you okay that you're going to have to say no to a lot of these other family things? And he was like, no, I wouldn't be okay. I'm like, exactly. So, you know, that's just the person that he is. And I understand, like, I'm not bashing against any father who has to do those kind of jobs because that's hard. That is so hard. And that in itself is self-sacrifice because now they're filling in their fatherly role in just a different capacity. But for us, this is what works for our family. And that's how we wanted to like raise our family, is to have both of them present. So that's just something that, you know, we're continuously working toward. And even now I'm trying to find like a job where I can work, you know, closer to home and just work from home so that I can be there for the two of them. Yeah.
You know, it's funny because me and Gracie were talking about this recently, you know, having Lily, it's just, you want to be there as much as possible. And then yet how much can I go out and be able to provide? And it is just time. There's not enough time, you know? And I've been in this struggle, like you're pointing out, like I do need to make more money and I do have the capacity to do it. But then how much time do I have to pull away from my family, which is what really matters.
Right.
So it's finding that space, at least the common ground of, you know, I'm providing. I might have to take time, like physical time away, but I come home and we're able to have the life that we want, to do the things that we like, that the kids would enjoy. And make and maximize the time that I'm home as much as possible. So I've been in this new, like having two is just
I'm sure it's a different world now.
It's totally starting. It's like, it's funny when we were having Lily, it was almost like we were talking like we've been here before. And then it started creeping in, like when she started like getting like 7 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant, it started creeping in my head. Like we've never been here before because we have a brand new baby.
Right.
And we have a toddler. So it's almost like, okay, we've never been here before. Scrap whatever we thought this was going to be. New territory completely. So then now having to provide for her, I started thinking like, all right, maybe I got to do more. Because I'm going to be honest, I took it lightly. Like with the pandemic, we were spoiled. I was home. I was working from home. I was here with the girls like every day.
Right.
And then now that things are opening up, there are opportunities coming up. And I'm like, so we talk and we're like, should I take this? Should I take that? It will provide us more. And then that was the most important talk we had was, it's about the quality of moments. It's not about like how much I can be home. Because at some point I started feeling like I could do more though.
Yeah.
And frankly, maybe the girls are getting tired of me sometimes when I'm home because, I'm a lot to handle probably. So then I think, all right, what if I do pull this much away, but I make this much? And then we have moments that are quality moments. Yes. Is the trade worth it? And like you said, every family's different and we got to have different roles, different hats.
Right.
I think that's going to be it's going to be the struggle forever of like how much family time, work, how much I can provide. And then when it really counts, will I show up for those moments? There's never an answer anymore.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
And that's something that we discussed when I went back to work.
Yeah.
Because now that I'm teaching in the classroom full time, Monday through Friday. So I'm basically gone from 7 a.m. to I get home around like 4-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, just depending on what I have to do at school. And so being home with her for a year and then like going back to work, that was definitely a hard transition. But then we said the same thing, like, even though I'm not spending as much hours with her, when I am home, she has me. Like that's like fully me time with her. It's just that full quality time. So when she gets me, she's just getting all of me. She's not getting me that's pulled in so many different directions, which sometimes I found was like the problem when I was home with her is like, I was taking care of her, trying to play with her, but then trying to do other things around the house too. And I felt like I was just getting pulled in so many directions that she was only getting 30% of me, But like now, okay, so I am gone and I do not see her, when I'm teaching, but when I am home, she gets 100% of me now.
Yeah.
Right. And so does RJ. And so in some respects too, it's like, going back to work, as hard as it was the best financial decision for us, in the moment that we're in. But also, I think that helped with, my postpartum struggles that I was going through as well. Like because then it allowed me to feel like the mom that I wanted to be, which was to be fully with her when I was with her. Because I felt like, I can't even tell you some of the things in that first year because it really does feel like a blur. And part of it could be lack of sleep, but I think it was just because I wasn't fully mentally there. I was just, in so many different directions. Yeah.
Spread way too thin.
Way too thin and spread way too thin and just too much on my plate. Just, I was crumbling every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that first year, if anything, as much as you can recall, because I see Gracie right now. Lily's almost 3 months, and like you pointed out, you're the source of life and nourishment for this young person that has no idea what the world is, and you're the source of life, literally. I see Gracie doing what she has to do like every few hours, and it's like around the clock. And then I see my child like growing into like she's all chubby now. And like, there's something so symbolic of just nourishing that child. It's so much more than just physical nourishment. I see them bonding. I'm sure RJ saw you guys bonding every time. And it takes so much out of you. It takes so much out of you, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
When you look back at that year, it sounds so cliche, but if you can find those moments where it's like, you're just around the clock, like a machine, you're just going like feeding, sleeping, changing a diaper, feeding, sleeping, changing a diaper. how would you encourage someone that's going through it right now, who's probably in this spread too thin phase? They're in a blur. What's something you could tell them right now to help them keep doing what they're doing, get through it?
So what we commonly hear to respond to that question is, this is only temporary.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a season, it's just a phase. But hearing that did not make me feel better. It almost felt like it was invalidating how I felt during those moments. So thinking back to that, I guess I would tell a mom who's going through that to, like, I know it's hard. It's so hard. And you probably feel like you are not doing enough, even though you're doing probably everything. Saying it's going to get better, it will get better. But it's also like this is that moment where it feels really hard, where it might be hard for your baby too. And they're struggling with you just as much as you are, you know? I think that was one thing that kind of helped me keep going, is like when I was going through a really tough time, so was Raina, you know? And so it's like we almost had each other in those moments, because she was, again, like I said earlier, like she was figuring me out and I was trying to figure her out. And it was like round the clock, every few hours we were meeting each other again, like, and I was feeding her, and it was like, how am I going to keep doing this? But it's like in this very moment, instead of thinking like, oh, this is just a season, it's going to get better, oh, just you wait when it gets to this point. Like, no, it's like in this moment, this is exactly where you need to be. And part of being a mother is going through something that you might not like, but in that moment, for that reason, for this child, this is what you both need.
Wow.
Even if you don't even understand it yet, right? And so, like, in that moment, I had no idea, why am I going through this? Why do I have to do this? But looking back on it a year from now, it's like, this is why, right? And now you look at your child, who's now, like, my kid's 13 months now. It's like, this is why we went through those things, to have this moment here. But I couldn't foresee that. I couldn't understand that in those really hard moments. And sometimes it's just like anything in life, it's like this, when you're going through something so tough, you can't see light. People will tell you there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, I don't believe you. I do not believe you. It is complete darkness where I'm at, right? But it's like, maybe just in that moment, for that, you know, current time, that's where you need to be. And you're right, it won't be permanent. It is just a season. But taking ownership almost, and like the dignity to be like, yes, this is where I need to be right now. It's going to be hard for both of us, but in this moment, we just have to do this just right now. And kind of taking that like day by day, that kind of was like, all right, I almost felt like a soldier. Like I was like, all right, like here we go. Like we're ready for battle every day that I woke up, because it was a battle as a new mom, you know, but it's like just taking that full conviction and ownership and telling yourself like, I am a mother. Because I think part of the struggle is when you're a new mom, you don't believe you're a mom. Like you haven't, like, for some, they like fully get into that role. And I think for me, it wasn't fully instinctual. I don't like it when people tell me, oh, it's just instinct, just go with your gut. It's like, I feel like I have no gut right now. You know, it's like, this is something I have to learn. Like I'm so by the textbook just with my personality. So it's like, I need to learn this. And so in those day-to-day moments where it was so hard, where I just felt like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm just doing this all day, 24/7. Like, how am I going to get out of this? It's like, this is where I need to be. And this is the role that I have been called to right in this moment. And I have not been called to any role outside of this, but right here for this child. And it's like, that made me feel more like I had more of a purpose and I had more of an impact on somebody other than myself.
Yeah, you've never been called to do this.
No.
And at this point, this is the only thing you're called to do day in and day out. I know, like, when you say, like, it's kind of like it's militant. Like you're just doing what you got to do in the moment in front of you. And when you said like when you're just in the darkness, like I saw one of your posts about PPD and postpartum anxiety too. You described this party, and it felt like you were just above the water. Everyone's having fun. The people are having drinks. You found yourself a drink, having fun, and then you slowly start sinking beneath the water, further and further away from the party. When you described it like that, and you even said you're underwater, no one can hear you until the next party starts, and you can find your way just to be above the water again. It's not even just a depressing picture. The struggle of that and the acceptance of like that, this is how life is. I would imagine not a lot of people get through that. Yeah. Does it still feel like that, or has it gotten better?
It's gotten a little better.
Okay.
Some days I think are better than others, like anything, but yeah, it's not to that level as it was before. But I wrote that because one of like my old friends was talking to me, and they're like, well, how's your, postpartum depression? I was like, well, it's still there. And then she had the best intentions for saying this. So I don't want to like bash her or anything. I think it was just a lack of understanding. But she's like, well, but you're like almost a year postpartum. It should be over now. Right. And so I was like, okay, I think there's like a misunderstanding of like what this is. And so I kind of had to explain it to her, and I found myself kind of using that analogy, and like, you know what, I need to write this down. Yeah. And so it kind of just unfolded itself in that way. And so basically the way that I describe it to people is like, postpartum depression and anxiety, it's still technically like regular clinical depression and anxiety. It's just, it happened postpartum, and your triggers are a little bit different than what would normally happen to someone who's not in a postpartum period. But that feeling of just barely making it, just literally barely keeping your head above the surface, that's what it kind of felt like for that first year. And like the thought of, like you said, like having to do it all over again the next day, it was like that's what was the hardest part. And that's why, like, for me, like going back to work might have been like a really good thing for me, because I mean, I'm still, I'm seeing my therapist, I'm still, going through my postpartum struggles, but it's just now, like when I'm with Raina, when I get home, like I don't feel like I'm just above the surface. I feel like I'm completely out of the pool. I feel like I can play with her. I feel like I'm fully immersing myself with her, instead of just like trying to do something while I'm still stuck in a pool. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that being a sort of pattern interrupt really helps you take a break?
Oh, totally. And I think that's what is so hard for moms, is not wanting to have that pattern interrupt, because there's guilt behind it, because there's like I just have to only do what moms do all day long. It's like, no, like you are still mom when you're out in your profession. Like that is a role that never leaves you. But when I get home from teaching, I'm no longer a teacher. I'm mom. But when I'm teaching in the classroom, I'm still mom. Like the thought of your child never leaves your head ever. And so you never leave your role as a parent, but having that break in the day has been, I think, something that's just helped me tremendously. I'm just looking for less of a break in the day, because being gone for almost 10 hours is just a little bit much.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. Honestly, that's such a big encouragement for people because of that guilt. I've heard it from multiple people. Like, you start questioning yourself, like, well, is this all I am now? Maybe that's it. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Because if you think about it, you're the only one that can nourish this child or be the mother for this child. So it is the most important vocation ever, right? To become a parent, because you have no other choice but to care for this other person. Now, granted, people have other choices, but if you truly care and you love your kids, you end up just accepting this role that's, oh, this is everything I'm going to be now. Getting over that guilt of like having time away, it's a struggle even for Gracie. She's told me that, like, when I would tell her, why don't you go out with your cousins or something, there's that feeling of, but I'm a mom. Like, is it okay for a mom to do this or whatever? That's the thing. It doesn't cancel everything out just because you're a mother. Same thing as, like we said earlier, it almost heightens everything, right? Because now you value all your moments away from them, and when you come back home,
Right.
you see them, everything's heightened again. It's renewed, if anything. That pattern interrupt is such an important thing, not just for this, but for like anyone's mental health.
Yes. No, it totally helps. And that's why, you know, they'll say things like go for a walk outside. Like just, you need to break that pattern. And I think that's what currently, like, that's what my job gives me. I'm just trying to find a pattern that's like I said, not as long, but also not as stressful, because it's pretty demanding right now.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine being a teacher, you're facing people who have no idea what you're going through, but yet you still have to show up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I do compare being a teacher as being a parent. You're responsible for other people. I find that as a challenge too, like to have people depend on you when we're, you know, in the classroom or something. And I do feel like it served me well being a teacher first before having a kid. And I'm sure people saw it in you. Like, I don't know if they've told you that, but as a teacher, of course, you take on this responsibility. And I'm sure people saw you as like, oh, I think she'd be a good mother. I've been told, like, I think you're going to be a good dad. Do you plan to have kids? People have asked me that. I'm like, yeah, of course. Because that's the ultimate vocation.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like everything we do away from the family, does it make you a better mother? Does it make you a better father?
Right.
Does it make you a better parent or just a better person? And I think people are in vocations, or they do jobs. They don't have a vocation. They're just doing this mundane job that doesn't inspire them, that doesn't give them value in life.
Right.
So then you're literally just draining your energy so that when you get home, I don't have enough energy for the family right now. But something like teaching, it's long hours, of course, but I'm sure that vocation alone just gives you more energy. And like you said, you're out of the pool
Yes.
when you're home.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful thing.
It is. I mean, I even tried the mundane jobs. Like when I was on leave, I was like a virtual assistant. And that sucked more energy and like joy from, you know, that time than going through the stresses of teaching.
Wow.
And so that's kind of when I knew, I was like, this is not for me. And I think that's when like I felt my calling to return to the classroom. And, you know, just like praying, you know, just praying about it. And when you get to that point in the road where you just have no idea what to do and what your purpose is and, you know, how you should do certain things in your life, that was the only thing I could do. Yeah.
Thinking about Reina now, she's at 13 months when we're recording this. Thinking about her future, thinking about, you know, the whatever it is, community, society that we're growing up in. What are some things that not worry you, but things that you value for her? Like, what are you thinking ahead about for her upbringing? What are some things that you want her to experience, things that you want her to understand about life as her mom right now?
I think first thing is her faith. I hope she grows up to be a woman of faith, and, you know, because I can't be here forever.
Yeah.
But she can have her faith forever with her, you know, and that's something that I hope she has with her. And just the importance of simplicity, because I feel like right now the world is so chaotic. There's lots of chaos, but also like there's just so many things that are thrown at you. Like, you need this, all of these things, you know, buy. And it's just like all of this stuff. And I want her to just value like simplicity in all aspects, you know, that you don't have to, and I'm not saying like she shouldn't aspire to be like the CEO of a company. It's just, but living a very simple life where, you know, she is able to serve others. She's able to find happiness with herself, you know, because I'm sure in your profession, you obviously see it, and I see it now in the classroom too. There's a lot of kids now who are really impacted with mental health issues, and it's really sad to see. And I don't want, you know, she is going to enter this world with that.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that, you know, through my parenting and RJ's parenting and through our faith and just the community that we bring her up in, that she has the strong mental strength and capacity to just keep going.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
that's something I think that's it's been on my mind for a long time, actually.
Yeah.
Just because I see it every day in the classroom, and it's just really sad to see with some of these students. And so now having a kid, it kind of makes you think to like, oh, like how do I fix this for this next generation, you know?
Exactly. And that is forced upon you, whether you like it or not, to start thinking about like their upbringing, their future, the world that they're going to live in.
Right.
And us as parents, like you're forced to become generative, to think about the next generation. And it's scary. It's scary to see the lives that some of these kids have lived. And I honestly think talks like this are super important, you know, with parents especially, because the issues that I see nowadays, especially like with work and like you see in the classroom, there's almost like a pattern that's like clear now to me, having a family. But the broken family is one of the root causes of all these issues, mental health, or, you know, just whatever it is. People are hurting. And I think the pattern that I see is just the broken family. And I truly believe that for our girls' generation, I truly believe that there's at least a big rebirth of traditional families again.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're trying to move towards, and just bringing that back in back home. And this is, I love my mom and dad, and I know RJ loves his parents too. And it's our parents worked so hard to provide food to the table and a roof over our heads. That was like their main role, and I have so much respect for, you know, how they did that. But it was also like long work hour days, and, you know, just seeing them for dinner time and then going to bed and then just kind of starting it all over. And so we're trying to find ways to still continue that, but in a way where we can be a little bit more present, you know? And that's kind of been like our main goal, because like you said, and I see this in the classroom, the students who do have, who are struggling, it's something's happening at home. It's not because of what's happening at school. It's actually because of what's happening at home. So technically, me as a teacher, I can only do so much, right? Because I'm limited within the walls of my classroom. And so really where it has to start is what's happening at home. How can you know, impact these children at home? And so it's like, I know this, we were talking about this before we started recording, but it's like, you just have this new perspective when you become a parent. These are things you would have never thought about, right? And like how, like, what's your role right now in this moment? What's your role when your daughters get older, you know, and like, what's going to be your role even when you're gone, right? It's like all of those things. And it's just like once you become a parent, you literally have this whole new vision. Like your horizon looks so different now. And it's better. It's definitely better, but it's like, oh, now there's like more, there's just definitely more struggles with it, but it's also to me, it's like a better sight to see. It's much more fulfilling, much more rewarding, but it's hard.
Yeah. You know, you saying that, like, nobody's perfect and every family has like issues and everything like that. I mean, arguably, I'm sure you would, I mean, you're living proof that no matter what, you know, your family has gone through, cycles can end with you.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm starting to see is when we continue cycles, especially negative ones, it's because we weren't able to grasp and understand and accept what has happened and transform that into something next for the next generation, something like life-giving for them. You know, for your families and RJ's families, like whatever you guys have been through, like you said, they did what they had to do. They did what they could. Right. And we respect them for that. But look at you guys now. And I think the fact that you've made it out of that to be an even better mother, to be an even better father than you could have been if we had the perfect family. I think those moments are what matter. Like, how much are you willing to swallow? How much are you willing to sacrifice? so that it stops with you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I don't even like to use the word like trauma because it's like, well, but look back during that time, like our parents literally did exactly what they were supposed to do in that moment. It wasn't wrong. And I struggle with the term generational trauma sometimes because I just don't think it gives a negative connotation. It
Definitely.
really does. I like the word cycle that you use because that's kind of what it is. Like you're just trying to make the next generation better, right? Like I would hope that when Raina becomes a mother, that she's a better mother than me.
100%.
You know, it's like you just want them to get better. And so I don't like to use the word like trauma so much because when I think about like how I was raised, I was like, there's nothing wrong with how I was raised. Like there really isn't. Like my parents did the best that they could in those moments. And like now knowing, like, because each generation gets more knowledge, it's like now that I know this, I'm going to do that, but better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, I want our kids' generation to do what we do, but better. Like it's just going to keep going. And I think that's what we mean by like breaking a cycle. It's, yeah, because it's like, well, you know, we still have to have respect for like that generation because it was so different at the time when they were raising us. And like now, I don't think they could raise children in the generation that we're raising our kids.
No, yeah.
It's so different, right? So it's like you're constantly just adapting and being flexible and trying to, you know, continue that generation, but with a better impact each time. Right.
That's all we can hope for.
Yeah.
Do our best, right? And I think that's the most important thing that I want people to get out of this. You know, when, if and when our daughters watch this talk in the future, I hope I live up to everything that I'm saying. And a lot of people, like, they ask me, like, you know, aren't you worried that like later on, like you completely screw up your life or something, and then all this stuff about like, you know, how you want to be this, you want to be a good father, whatever, and then your daughters see like all that talk, like all your talking, and then you just didn't show up. And I'm like, you know, that element of risk is something I'm willing to take.
Yeah.
If we're talking like this, not only are we speaking it out to the universe, but you're challenging yourself. I'm challenging myself.
You're holding yourself accountable.
Exactly. And I think that's what really strengthens people. Like when you have no safety net now, like I have no safety net. Like if I completely mess up my life, Mella's going to know, Lily's going to know. And am I willing to take that risk in order to spread these messages? And honestly, and I think when our daughters grow up and they do watch this, I hope they will. And I hope they're not embarrassed by this.
I was going to say, they're probably going to be embarrassed.
Yeah, probably. Like we're totally going to be those parents that like, oh gosh, don't listen to my dad. But I do hope that we can fully live up to, or at least close to, what we're saying right now. And I truly believe that we can. Yeah. It's possible because we're talking about it now. It's possible.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I really do appreciate about our generation is like we're learning to kind of speak up and talk about it and communicate. Because that wasn't a thing before. It was like if you feel something,
just bottle it in.
Bottle it in. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And I think now it's like, no, like talk about it because we've seen the effects of just bottling it in, right? And so like even platforms like this with your podcast, it's like it allows people to actually resonate with somebody who could be going through the same thing. It can inspire someone who might be needing that, you know, just that one piece that they just needed to just keep going. But then also, like you said, it's just holding yourself accountable to being a better person and a better parent, which is ultimately at this point, like that is our daily goal. It's like each day that you wake up, what are you going to do today? That's actually going to make some sort of impact on yourself, you know, your partner, your kids, like whatever it is. But it's like, how are you going to, you know, continue that? And that's, I mean, I can talk about it, but I don't think that every day, right? But you try, you try. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that like years from now when we watch this, we're gonna like smile and look back at it and be like, you know, like, how's this going? How's this going for you?
Yeah, just hoping and praying it works out well. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Rubian.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed my time here.
Perfect. And honestly, I'm a fervent believer. It's the first of many, if anything.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.